next section of the blanket is tapestry crochet, and it's worked following a chart. Now there's a nice detailed explanation of how charts work in the pattern, but I'm just going to run through it here. It's quite straightforward when you know how they work. Each square of the chart represents one double crochet or US single crochet stitch, and the colour of the squares on the chart represent the colours of the stitches in the blanket. So they're numbered starting at the bottom right hand corner with 1, and the numbers going from right to left, 1 to 30, are the stitch numbers, and the rows going from bottom to top, 1 to 25, are the row numbers. So our pumpkin has 30 stitches and 25 rows to complete one pumpkin. Now your blanket is 150 stitches wide, so we're going to repeat this pattern 5 times across the blanket to give us 150 stitches. So that's 30 stitches times 5 is 150. And if you're left-handed, you can work this chart from left to right instead. It will make no difference to the pattern. The top of the pumpkin will be pointing the other way, but that's absolutely fine. No one will ever notice. So you don't need to make any adaptations to the pattern if you are left-handed. Just work from left to right instead of right to left. So we're going to start at row 1, and we're going to work 5 repeats of row 1. So we're going to work 30 black double crochet US single crochet stitches 5 times, and that will give you 150 stitches in row 1. And then we're going to work row 2, so we're going to start where the number is and work backwards. So we're going to work 30 black stitches 5 times, so that's 150 black stitches. And then row 3 is 10 black stitches followed by 10 orange stitches followed by 10 black stitches, but I'll show you how to do the colour changes when we get to that part. So let's dive in with the first row, and I will show you how the tapestry crochet works. I've sewn in my tails. It's a good idea to try and keep up with your tails as you go. It saves you a big job at the end, but also it's easier working on the tapestry sections without all of the tails hanging down. So I'm going to change to black, and this time I'm using a 4.5mm hook. By going up to a slightly larger hook, it gives you looser stitches, and it will help to keep your edge straight. You might find if your stitches are too tight that your sides pull in, so larger hook will help with that. So change to black, chain 1, because this is a double crochet row US single crochet, turn, and the chain does not count as a stitch, so I'm going to put my first stitch in the very first stitch of the row, and then I'm going to follow the chart. So it says work 30 black double crochet stitches, and we're going to repeat that 5 times, so that's 150 black double crochet stitches across the width of the blanket. So that's my row 1, and make sure that you don't skip this last stitch on the end into the top of that starting 2 chain. So I've got 2 pattern repeats here, but you will have 5 pattern repeats, so you'll have 150 black stitches across the width of your blanket. So now we're going to work row 2, and row 2 is the same, so it's 30 black stitches repeated 5 times, so it's 150 black stitches in the other direction. So I'm going to chain 1 and turn, and the chain 1 doesn't count as a stitch, so into the very first stitch, oops, and then 1 double crochet, US single crochet into each stitch across. That's row 2 of the chart complete. Now row 3 has the 10 black stitches followed by 10 orange stitches followed by 10 black stitches, and that's again repeated 5 times across the width of the blanket. So we've got a colour change in this one. So we're going to start the row in the same way as before, so chain 1, turn, and then the first stitch in the very first stitch of the row, because the chain 1 doesn't count as a stitch, and then we need 10 in all, so that's 1, 2, 3, 8, 9, 10, and I'm going to stop the 10th stitch with 2 loops on the hook, and we're going to change colour in the same way as we did for the bobble row. So I've got my orange yarn here, and I'm going to make a loop. Let's get that out of the way. And I'm going to finish this stitch by pulling through a loop of orange yarn. So as we did with the bobbles, we're changing colour in the stitch before we need to use it, and that means that this black stitch is completed with a loop of black on the top, but we're ready to start our next stitch in orange. So I'm going to put the tail to the back, and now I'm going to work 10 orange stitches, but I'm going to work them over the black yarn, so I'm trapping the black yarn inside the stitch, and this is exactly the same as we did for the double crochet stitches in the bobble row. So 10 stitches, so I'm going under that black yarn and trapping it inside the stitch. 1, 2, 3, 9, 10, and because we have to change back to black again for the next stitch, I'm going to leave 2 loops on the hook. Before I change colour, I'm just going to have a look at the back, and can you see that there's little loops of black poking out? I'm just going to gently pull so that the loops sit down inside the stitches. Now I'm not pulling it really tight, so I'm distorting these stitches. It's just enough to encourage them to lay inside the stitches and not poke out. So now we're going to change back to black. Now to stop your yarns tangling, you want to make sure that your orange yarn is towards the back and your black yarn is to the front, and then we're going to change back to black. So I'm going to pull through a loop of black. So my orange yarn is at the back, my black yarn is at the front, and they are not twisted together. So now I'm going to do my next 10 black stitches, and again I'm going to trap the orange yarn inside the stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 9, 10. So check the back, make sure there's no orange loop sticking out. So that is my first pattern repeat. That's 10 black stitches, 10 orange stitches and 10 black stitches. And so I can keep track of my pattern repeats. Going to bring in our friend the stitch marker, and I'm just going to pop that stitch marker into that last stitch, so into that 30th stitch. And now we're ready to work another pattern repeat. So that's 10 black stitches, 10 orange stitches, 10 black stitches, 9, 10, and we've got a colour change, so I'm stopping with 2 loops on the hook for the 10th stitch. So I'm going to bring my black yarn to the front, my orange yarn to the back, so we're still not twisted together, and I'm going to finish the stitch with the orange. So we're now ready to use the orange. So that's 10 of those. 2, 3, that's 8, 9, stop on the 10th, check that the yarn's laying nicely, and then we're changing colour, so black to the front, orange behind, so we're still not twisted together, and I'm going to change to black, and then the last 10 black stitches of this repeat, so 1, 2, 9, 10, and I've carried the orange yarn along to the end of the row. It just gives a neater finish, makes it easier to pick up the colours on the way back. So row 4 of the blanket, so this time we have 8 black stitches, then we have 14 orange stitches, and then 8 black stitches. But once you've got your first row and your stitch markers in, it gets easier because you don't have to count every single stitch. So I know that this is 10 black stitches, but on this row I only want 8 black stitches. So I know that I'm going to have 2 orange stitches before the orange starts. So I'm going to turn, and I've got my chain 1 and then my first stitch in that very first stitch, so I'm still trapping that orange yarn, and I'm going to work my stitches. So now 2 stitches before the orange starts need to be orange, so I'm going to change colours, so black to the front again, orange to the back so we don't get twisted, change colour, and then I can make my orange stitches. So that's the 2 orange stitches on the chart before the orange starts in the row below. And then I can make my orange stitches. And I'm not really counting these because I know that I have to make 2 more orange stitches after the orange stitches in the row below before I go back to the black stitches. This is just reading the picture you're creating rather than just rigidly relying on numbers. Okay, so 2 more orange stitches after that last orange stitch in the row below. So that's 1, 2, and then we have a colour change. So orange yarn to the back, change to black, and then I'm going to finish the repeat with black stitches. So that's working up to my marker. So I've worked my first pattern repeat of row 4 and notice that it finishes one stitch before the marker. So you have to imagine your pattern repeats as vertical blocks of 30 stitches. So the last stitch, so stitch 30 of this pattern repeat, we put a marker in. So this becomes stitch 1 of the pattern repeat going back this way. So I'm just going to take that marker out and then work the first stitch of the next pattern repeat and then pop the marker back in. That was our first stitch, so then we can just carry on working the pattern. And just remember that you're always going to keep the orange yarn to the back and the black yarn to the front, and then you won't get twisted up. So I'm going to change to orange because we're 2 stitches before the orange in the row below. Oh, don't forget to trap that yarn. So here's my row 4 complete, and now it's just a case of following the chart row by row to build up the picture. I'm just going to bring in my finished pumpkins. So I've got 5 of them repeated across the width of the blanket, and you'll see that you can still see little flecks of coloured yarn showing through between them. This is completely normal. It's just part of the charm really of tapestry crochet. It doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong, and you can't hide them using this technique. One of the lovely things about it though is that it's reversible, so it looks just as good on the back as it does on the front because you don't have those carried yarns behind. So if I just run through my blanket now, you can see all of the repeated elements. So we've got our humbug stripe repeated, our treble crochet stripes, we have ghosts, more tapestry crochet, worked in exactly the same way as the pumpkins, and then we've got more humbug stripes, treble crochet stripes and bobbles, more humbug stripes, tapestry crochet, humbug stripes, then we've got our cats, humbug stripe, treble crochet stripes, and then we finish with treble crochet stripes and bobbles. So all of those elements are repeated throughout the blanket. So if when you get to any of these parts you need a little refresher, you can just re-watch the video because it's exactly the same all the way through, and the written pattern will give you all the details you need about colour changes, where your yarns should be front and back for the different tapestry sections. So I really would recommend reading all the way through the pattern to make sure that you're familiar with everything before you start. So all that's left to do now is to add a border and then to add the details to our characters. So I've made a start on my border. I'm using the 4mm hook and the white yarn, and I've joined the white yarn by pulling up a loop in the very first stitch in the top right hand corner, chain 1, doesn't count as a stitch, 1 double crochet, 2 chains, 1 double crochet, that's 1 US single crochet, 2 chains, 1 US single crochet, and that forms the corner, and then 1 double crochet, US single crochet in each stitch along the top edge, so all the way along. So this is the easy part of the border because it's just 1 stitch in each stitch along. But how do you know how many stitches to put on the long edges to make sure that you get a nice flat border that isn't ripply and wavy because it's got too many stitches in it? So I've got a little tip for that. I'm just going to make a corner, so that's a double crochet in the last stitch, 2 chains and a double crochet, US single crochet. And my tip is, if it's a treble crochet row, put 2 double crochets at the end of it. If it's a single crochet row, so for instance the row with the bubbles in, or the rows of tapestry crochet, they're single crochet, or if it's a half treble row, so this is a half treble row in the humbug stripe, just put 1 double crochet at the end. So I've turned this corner and I've already put 1 double crochet at the end of this row, so I'm going to put 1 more. And then this is a treble crochet row, so I'm going to put 2 stitches at the end of it. And this is a treble crochet row, so I'm going to put 2 in. And then another one. So I'm going to put 2 in. And then this next row with the bubbles in is a double crochet row, so I'm only going to put 1 stitch in there. And just keep working along, 2 stitches in your treble crochet rows and 1 stitch in your half treble or double crochet rows, and you don't really need to count them. Doesn't matter how many stitches you end up with. If you just follow that pattern all the way along, you will end up with just the right amount of stitches to give you a neat border. So I'm at the end of my first border round, and I'm just going to slip stitch under both loops of the first double crochet, US single crochet to join. And now the rest of the border is rounds of single crochet, and I'm going to do 1 more round of white, then I'm going to do a round of black, and I'm going to finish with a round of white. I've decided to keep it simple because there's lots going on in this blanket, but if you want to, you can add additional rounds of the other colours you have left over if you want to make it a bit wider. So all of the rounds from now on are done in the same way. So I'm going to chain 1, and this doesn't count as a stitch, and then I'm going to make my first double crochet into the same stitch, and then I'm at my corner, so I'm going to double crochet, US single crochet, chain 2, another double crochet in the same stitch to turn the corner, and then it's just a case of 1 double crochet in each stitch all the way around. So I'm going to do this all the way around with my white. I'm going to add a round of black, finish with a round of white again, and then I'll show you what it looks like when I've finished. So here's my border. I got to the end of my final planned row of white. I just didn't feel like it was quite finished, so I've added another round of black. I think it looks much better and I'm happy with that now. So there's my border complete. I'm adding the details to our little characters now. I've kept it really simple on the bats and the cats and just used really simple little cross stitches. I've got one more left to do. I'm going to do that one now. So I'm using some orange yarn and I'm just going to thread that onto my needle. And the cross stitches, I've just positioned them across the double crochet stitches, so I'm just going to come up from underneath and make the first leg of the cross. It's very hard to see on the black, but I'm just working across that double crochet stitch, and then I'm just going to come up and then work the other leg of the cross, and again I'm just going across that double crochet stitch, and that just gives you your little cross for the eye. And then to make it neat on the back, I'm just going to pass the yarn under the back of the stitches, so just under the back so it can't be seen on the front. So I can come up for my second eye, make the first leg of the cross, go across, and then come back across to finish off the eye. And pull through, and there are my little bat eyes. And then these tails you can just sew in on the back in the usual way. And I've done the cats in exactly the same way, but because they're a side view they only have one eye embroidered on, and I've used the leftover green yarn for these. I've got some black yarn on my needle to make the eyes for the ghosts, and the pattern will show you where to position your eyes. There's a photograph with little dots to show you where the stitches go, but essentially the eyes are just embroidered in the holes between two stitches. So I've got one completed here, and this is my last one. So I'm just going to bring my needle up in the stitch marked on the diagram, and then back down in the second stitch marked on the diagram, and I'm just going to make 8 stitches on top of one another between those two stitches. So that's 1, 2. Now try not to pull too tight to distort, you don't want to distort this, and try to position these loops above and below each time as you're making them, and this will give you a really nice rounded eye shape. So this one's going above, so that's 2, and then I'm going to make one below. So I'm just letting that loop fall below. So that's 3. 4. 5. 6. 7. And this is my 8th one, and can you see it's formed a nice round eye shape? And then I'm just going to flip over, and I'm going to do what we did for the bats and just pass this yarn under the back of the stitches till it's in the right place to start the next eye. And that yarn will be hidden, and it will give you a neat finish on both sides. So let's add the second eye. So there are my eyes, and then you can just sew in the tails on the back, and it's as neat on the back as it is on the front. So there we have it, Halloween Dreams blanket all done. I really hope you enjoy making it, and you'll enjoy me for more crochet soon.